Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Elfenworks in Harmony with Hope Roundtable discussion. My name is Byron Gamble, and I am so excited to get this conversation started. Some background on myself: I once was a video manager for Campus Movie Fest when everything was on the road and running full steam ahead. And now I've gotten the chance to transition into the role of a school partnership manager, which allowed me to really connect with the students and watch their growth with each movie making week, which was a new development of just this year. This category especially was important to me as it asked students to use their platform to discuss a subject that they are especially passionate about. I'd like to welcome Tobi James from Elfenworks to say a few words before I introduce our participant.
Thank you, Byron. Hello, everyone. Our partnership with CMF dates back to over a decade, and it's been an honor and my pleasure to be project manager for Elfenworks Foundation these last 4 years. This is truly the highlight of my job. I find it so exciting that these films can point the way forward. And I want to introduce you to our founder, but before I do, I would like to talk to all of the students out there who will be submitting films and making films, that with the exception of horror films, you can submit to this category regardless of your genre. In other words, if you're creating a musical or animation or sci-fi or so on, you can still submit to the category as long as your film tackles an issue you care about, having to do with climate or social justice, and it points the way toward hope. So anyway, I'm so excited to be here, and thank you for having me. And I'd like to introduce you to our founder, Dr. Lauren Speeth, founder of Elfenworks Foundation.
Hello, Campus Movie Fest. My name is Lauren Speeth of the Elfenworks Foundation, and I'm so honored to be addressing you. I wish it could be in person. I want to thank you for submitting films to our category. Your films pointing the way forward to hope in issues of our time, in social and climate justice, make the difference. They touch hearts and they touch minds. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for joining us and for being a part of our category.
Amazing. Now let's introduce the participants at this roundtable. So if you don't mind, just raise your hand when I get to you so we can have a face to the name. First up, we have Meiya from San Jose State University with Igniting Change. A woman complacent with the world around her suffers through the wrath of climate change, taking her through a life-changing experience. Next, we have Doremus from Pratt Institute with Kibu. Kibu, a small and helpless alien, must navigate his way through his home, the forest, after surviving a forest fire. Next, we have Briggs II from Old Dominion University with Hope Speaks. A son asks the question, what is hope? His parents attempt to explain this to the 5-year-old. This category was created for any student storytellers that want to use their platform to inspire hope for any social injustice, whether that be racial prejudice, climate change, or homelessness in their hometown. These films leave us with a social issue explained and the feeling of hope on the horizon. And without further ado, let's start off the conversation with some more background information. So if you all don't mind just kind of going around and telling me about what feeling inspired this film that you did.
Okay, so for my film, Igniting Change, what kind of inspired our film was we all kind of got together. First, I got like a group together, and I knew that I either wanted to tackle kind of either talking about the pandemic or, the fires that have been going on, because the fires have been like really affecting all of us personally living in like the Bay Area of California. All of us are going to San Jose State and kind of are still in the area. And so when the fires started happening, it was just so scary. And we all recall that day we woke up and it was dark and we looked out the window and it was orange and it was dark all day because of how much smoke was in the air. We had to keep our windows closed and everything, just so that, we wouldn't have the smoke coming into our homes. And that entire situation was so scary for us. And it really, being in like the heat of that really like open our eyes, like, this, we have to say something about this. We have to do something about this. So that kind of is where we got the inspiration to start working on our film, which talks about the forest fires that have been going around on the coast. And we really wanted to touch on, it really, like all these small things that people are doing are affecting, the world, even if you may not know, even if it doesn't feel like it has a direct impact. doing small things to help the environment is so important, because people are really being affected by fires and so many other things going on in climate change.
Awesome. Jack, what about you?
Yeah, so my name is Jack. I study 3D animation at Pratt Institute, and when I was coming up with my junior year fall semester film, my studio film, I was, thinking about had a lot of different ideas. Most of them sci-fi related, because I tend to be a little bit of a sci-fi geek, and it was really hard to keep anything straight, because similarly to Meiya, my mind was on the forest fires on the West Coast. My grandmother has lived there for, my entire life. And I remember looking at some of these photos and thinking, it's so weird that my grandma's there, because it looks like an alien planet that these photos are coming from. So launching off of that, I set it on an alien planet. I dealt with similar forest fires wreaking havoc in an alien forest and affecting a little alien protagonist. And I wanted to capture that sort of confusion and fear that comes with a bright orange sky and just so much destruction and loss. But much more importantly was the idea that I was very certain that I didn't want it to end on a downer. I wanted it to end on a note of hope and a possibility of change. And I like to think that I did that, but I think that was more than anybody else. It was really for me. I think that was what I needed for myself at the time.
Awesome. And Paul, I'll toss it over to you.
Yes, Paul Briggs, Old Dominion University, Norfolk, Virginia. My film Hope speaks about a 5-year-old boy. My inspiration for it was dealing with the fact that I had the birth of a nephew who would turn 1 year old on the 25th of June, so he'll turn a year old. And so with everything that has been happening in this climate, racial climate in America, with the Breonna Taylor, with the George Floyd, things of that nature. And when kids are coming of age, that talk that you actually have to have, as far as what is their hope for their child? What is their hope for their little one, that they've nursed up until this point. And now they're getting into the crossroad path of what the world is. And of course, as parents, you always want to shield the kids from everything. You want to try to grow them up in it. But the challenge of it was, what will hope be for that child? What the child thinks of hope and what the parent thinks of hope, and that whole dichotomy of it, for the child, it'd be something like, I just want a dog. And so the fact that my actor, Kai, he did all of that was off the cuff. Like, they didn't rehearse it or anything. I said, look, just have a conversation of what hope is, to you, and what hope is to you. And for Kai, it was from that childlike innocence of I just want a dog, I hope we can have a dog someday. And whereas for the parent, that grow and strong in stature, and that he'll be judged, like Martin Luther King said, be judged for the content of his character and not by the color of his skin. And so I just wanted to be able to capture that innocence, that every parent that has a child will have with their child. And I think we hopefully capture that on the film.
Absolutely. And how was it working with, because you all did different mediums. You did with people, you were working with people. And Jack, you were doing like this beautiful 3D rendering animation. And then Meiya, you had incredible textures and more of a 2D type of animation. What made you choose that type of art? We can start, Paul, what made you work with people?
I wanted to be as like almost an everyman type of conversation, dinner time, or it was right after the mom is doing the dishes, or post dinner, and the son is doing the homework and having to work, because especially compound the fact with the kids having to learn virtual. And so for Kai, this was his first year doing the virtual thing. So you have that whole schism of not having that traditional schooling as we all dream of in kindergarten, going off to school, with your backpack full of supplies. Okay, now I'm home and I have mom and dad who I've seen for all 5 years of my life. So now it's like, okay, now let's go over, okay, what today's homework was. Okay, hope, what is hope? All right. And then just having that conversation of what it is. And it shows the different learning styles that the parents are our first teacher. And so, and I just wanted to capture that essence of just not Americana, but just worldwide of after a meal, that family dynamic unit, and these lessons that can be learned around the table.
And Jack, what inspired you to kind of work with this 3D type of look for animation?
Yeah, I typically work in 3D animation. I do sometimes do live action and 2D, but 3D is tends to be my favorite because it's just the one that I always go back to for probably for a number of reasons. One of them is that I have a lot of personal nostalgic memories with 3D animation because of, you know, growing up. I'm pretty young, but growing up with all those Disney, Pixar, Warner Brothers classics that were just sort of starting to experiment with 3D animation. A lot of those were my first experience to film. So I wanted to use that and almost take advantage of that, because when we see, I think when a lot of people see any sort of animation, you know, or 3D or 2D animation, they sort of assume it's going to be lighthearted, you know, something that they can just put their kids in front of. And I wanted to use that as sort of a way to emphasize the stolen innocence of the protagonist of the film, because the protagonist is a young little alien who, you know, loses his home. And I thought that that would most effectively drive that point home. And then I also find that since so many people have experience with animation as kids, or for myself as an adult, we all have really specific memories linked to animation. So when we see animated characters suffering, we feel a strange sort of sympathy with them on like a childlike level.
And Meiya, what about you?
Yeah, so my reasoning to choose kind of this 2D animated medium was similar to Jack's, where our team was most comfortable with making 2D animation at the time. And also, you know, it's like you were saying about, you know, it being kind of targeted towards children when we were younger. I wanted it to be something that, you know, all audiences could kind of relate to. In addition to that, we also chose, you know, this medium of animation as opposed to like live action or something else, because it was something that we could do together in quarantine, because all of us, you know, were at different points or in different locations. So it was hard for us to meet up. Also not very safe for us to meet up since this was last fall. So we decided that it would be best to, you know, kind of work virtually online to make this 2D animated short film. As for kind of like the texture of our film, we added like this paper texture in compositing over like the entirety of the film. And we kind of had a similar thing going on with, you know, the rough edges and the backgrounds as well, to make it more tactile, so that the viewer can kind of like, you know, feel, you know, all the things that are happening. Also, we used paper because paper can burn. And so we kind of wanted to incorporate that into the story. If you look really closely at the textures, the paper starts out like very smooth. And as it gets further and further into the conflict, like more and more things happening, to like, you know, the fire and the evacuation, the paper is like completely crumpled in terms of like the texture on the screen. And we were kind of like playing with that texture to kind of highlight, you know, these moments in the story where, you know, to highlight, you know, the conflict and in the story. And yeah.
No, that's incredible. And you said 19 people worked on your film?
Yeah, 19 people total. It was, I started because I knew that, you know, animated short films, especially like 2D animated, where you want to like go through roughs and cleans, take a long time. So I started asking people I knew in my year, like, are you interested in helping out? And then San Jose State especially has a very like tight-knit animation community. So I actually reached out on Instagram and like in my stories, I was like, hey, is there any other like Shrunken Headman Club members who would want to help out in a short film like made in a week? And I had a lot of people reaching out, and I was like, oh, rope your friends in on this. And we ended up having like a pretty big team. So this was like the biggest team that I've worked with. And I quickly learned that, you know, leads were important, because me and my producer were handling everything on like biz dev to like animation. it was a lot of, a lot of work, and a lot of, bouncing around towards different departments just to make sure everything was done correctly, and a lot of going back and forth and like the production schedule, because especially for us, we really wanted to make sure to nail that story, because our story was the most important part of our film. So our story ended up pushing like our animation a few days behind, which is a lot of time in a week-long span. But I wouldn't have survived like that week without my producer Lillian Lee. But eventually, we all came together and kind of compiled this film, and I think it turned out really great.
That's awesome. And way to use social media to like find a network, because during these times it is so, I mean, you can't work with like people. It's so hard to communicate. So that was awesome. And 19 people, to have that all under your leadership, that's a huge testament. Jack, I'm so curious how you did this one person. That is just phenomenal. Tell me about how that process was, because you might have had to delegate to 19 people, which is crazy. And Jack, you had that all on your shoulders. How did that work?
Yeah, it was pretty rough. I don't know if I'm more jealous of Meiya for having the help, or less envious of not having to delegate the work to so many other people. But it was definitely a challenge working alone, because the program that I study in works. They really emphasize working on your own and understanding all the elements of animation. But then working alone, and then in an additional layer of isolation with the state of the world, the state of the health of America and the world back in the fall of 2020, when I was doing the bulk of this film, it was a really strange workspace, because I wasn't able to turn to my friends who might have also been working on something of their own. I wasn't able to go hang out in somewhere more public, really. So working alone, obviously one of the biggest challenges is making sure I got everything done. And I can tend to be a little scatterbrained. So it was really crucial that I had everything as organized as it possibly could. And yeah, with all these things, like with all these projects that I make on my own, there is always a point just before the end where I'm confident it won't get done at all. And then like I blink, and in like a haze, I finished it. I never remember how. I have no recollection of like the last week of any project I've ever worked on. But yeah, so I worked on this for a couple of months, and it's thankfully only a couple minutes long. It was a real thrill to make, and it was a real accomplishment that I'm very proud of.
Awesome. And Paul, I'm just curious, like, how was working with live actors, especially in the craziness of a pandemic? How did that all go down?
Yes, the timing was key and critical. Matter of fact, the shoot itself is like, because I said, okay, we're in a confined space. I can't even be there long. We did everything in 2 takes, two camera setup, 1 shot, 1 kill. It's like, that's all we really had time for. And then the location was trying to find, it was a new location for me and my actors. As a matter of fact, they had just moved into that place the day before. So it's like, now we have to try to stage and stuff. So everything there was normal. That was already there. So it's like being able to use the resources that was there. And then scheduling the time to where I can get the father, the son, and the mother. It worked out perfectly. Because I was like, Lord, who am I going to use? Because again, trying to get scheduling, and not just them, but I had others as well as a backup. You want to have a backup, and then a tertiary backup and all that. And then as different ones started falling out, okay, well, let's go here. All right, let's shoot it here. Can we rent this? And then, but being able to do it in one fell swoop as far as the actual shooting. And because again, like I said, with the live actors and the time and the constraints, because even in Virginia, they had a midnight curfew. So everybody has to be off the roads and everything. So they said, we can only shoot in the evening. All right, well, we got midnight curfew. So I got to come in and shoot. All right, get back in the car and go. And get back to the house. I edit and all of that later. So, but it was beautiful. It turned out so much better than I could imagine.
And it also, I feel like the way that you described that helped with the organic nature of the film, because it really did, it captured the childlike innocence that was so beautifully done. So I think that worked out really, really well. How did you all hear? I know you all have like different histories of when you learned about the Elfenworks Foundation. Tell me about that journey. How did you all first hear about it?
I first heard about it 2 years ago prior. I had a staff member came in and he was like, "Hey, I want to do the student film. Can you help me with it?" And I said, "Okay, yeah, sure, let's go." Actually, I take it back. It was 3 years prior, and we went to the campus side, and he didn't win, but I saw so many of my other staff that have been in different bit projects, and so now they gave us the know-how to see what does it take to make a successful film. And then the next year we go in, and then with Elfenworks was kind of like, I was like, I think this could work for Elfenworks. Yeah, so we did the story, put it in, submitted it, and it was such a beautiful. I know they have a breathing app. I with my iPhone 7, I still can use the app on it. They teach you how to breathe in and meditate. So with the Elfenworks Foundation, that was beautiful. Learning that once I went down there to Atlanta, being part of the roundtables, all the ingenuity of all of the filmmakers. You know, my fellow finalists here, as well as all the ones that was there in 2019 and 2020. I did watch it online, the virtual ones. Yes, just seeing the creative and seeing how much everybody tackles these topics. You know, this is not something that that's treaded lightly. This is stuff that that we looking at ways of solution of addressing problems in the world. So that's the beauty that I love of Elfenworks Foundation. And I'm always thankful for them opening that door for us to be able to do these things and tell these stories and have an audience that someone can hear.
And Jack, how did you first hear of Elfenworks?
Yeah, sort of similar to Paul. I think Paul said that really beautifully. I had seen the festival last year. I thought it was a really nice and special festival, because a lot of them just sort of tend to be best film or like best whatever, more general. And I thought that this one had something to say. I thought it had a really nice thing to say. And then, to be totally honest, I kind of forgot about it when I was making my film, because I was so distracted and focused on finishing it. And it wasn't until after recently when I realized, oh, the film that I made would actually work really well for that submission. So I found it again. Maybe a friend had sent it to me, and I read it wrong. I thought I'd missed the deadline to apply for it, and I was a little bummed. And I was like, all right, whatever, next year. But then obviously, I did not miss the deadline. I went back. I realized I had read it wrong. I submitted like with a day or two to spare. Not my most organized moment, but clearly I had used all my organization on the film. So I got in, and I was thrilled to even just be submitting to it, and even more thrilled to be among the other finalists here.
That's awesome, and so cool to hear that you were working like so passionately on what you believe, and then it happened to line up. That's incredible, and it shows that this is what you're passionate about. That's so cool. Meiya,
thank you.
Yeah, similar to Jack. I went through the same thing. I was watching the competition last year, and seeing all these like amazing films going through like the category on the CMF website. Excuse me. I did find out through Elfenworks through CMF, and I thought that was amazing. But as we were making the film, we were primarily making it for that movie making week, rather than Elfenworks itself. And so when I went to kind of submit the film, and all the messages that it was carrying with it, I saw different categories I could submit it to, and I was like, oh, this fits perfectly with Elfenworks. And hopefully in that more people will be able to see this film and see this message, and kind of take in that knowledge about climate change and fighting against it.
Very cool. And because of the time crunch that you all had to face with the pandemic and Campus Movie Fest time crunch and everything going on, if you had anything that you could add to your film, say you had another year to work on it, is there anything that you would include? And we can start with whoever is ready, because that's a harder question. And so feel free to take your time with thinking on that one. But if anyone knows right off the top of their head, I'd be curious.
I suppose I can answer that, because the deadlines and time crunches are something that I'm very familiar with, and I often find myself praising the fact that I have deadlines, because I think if I had another year to work on it, I would spend every single second of the year working on it, and I'd probably go insane. So I'm very grateful that it was due eventually. Lord knows if I would have finished it. But yeah, since I was working alone, I probably would have just made it a little bit longer. I think I would have shown a little bit more of the Kibu's home, but maybe before the fire, maybe more specific things to his shelter that were destroyed. And to tell you the truth, it might have been way worse. I always worry that I'm adding too much or I'm taking things too far. So I think the universe, who knows, maybe Elfenworks, maybe Campus Movie Fest, maybe they were looking out for me. And I'm very grateful that it was due when it was. I could be wrong. Maybe it'd be way better with a year, but I'm pretty happy with where I got in the end.
On behalf of Campus Movie Fest, we were looking out for you. So
Thank you for that.
I know for me, wow, that's a tough question, because I thought about the first concept I had about Hope Speaks was dealing with the whole Breonna Taylor Me Too movement. And so my original formation of it was a mother and daughter, because I wanted to capture both the African-American experience, the feminine experience, the age gap and all of that. And so, but fate had his way of working. Not unlike Blessing in Disguise in 2019. I know we had this violinist that we was going to use as the background music, and everything we had to set up, his location we were going to shoot, that didn't work. And we just happened at the last minute, like Jack was saying about that time crunch, is like, sometimes in times of crisis, that greatness can rise. And so we was able to find this music that fit still to the tone, but had kind of a bluesy feel. Because this is dating myself, but I remember there was a film called Adventures in Babysitting, and there's a scene where you can't leave without singing the blues, and so that's what I thought of that, and submitted that to the director. He found music and it fit. So when I talked to him about this film and being the finalist, he said, Paul, just like what happened with us, he said, you already had these people slotted to play it, but it ended up being this group, ended up being your actors for it, and on the week of, it's like, all right, we ready to go. Oh, we can't do it. Your main actors, now we got to scramble and find, like, who can I get that can capture the essence? And for Kai, my child actor, oh my God, I can't say enough about him. I cannot, because it just, I don't think I would have had a better kid. It just, because he just captured, like I said, 2 takes, that's it, and really the first take, he forgot to look for wait till the water cut off before he turned and started speaking. So really it's 1.5 takes. So but like Jack said, sometimes I want to make sure, I'm like, man, maybe I could have added a little bit more. But sometimes brevity is the soul of wit. So sometimes just keeping it short, tight, concise, can be better than trying to keep it super long. So.
And Meiya, what about you?
Yeah, so I think that I would try to not add any more time to my film. I think like if I had extra time to work on it, I think the priority would be like going into kind of polishing the film a little bit more and like the look, to kind of, get into those animations, getting everything on model and, getting that, Disney-like polish to all the animation. Like that would be the goal, but with only a week, we gotta rest that production process a little bit more. I think if we had more time, and also like one of the things that we might have focused on was kind of getting story revisions and pitching the story to other people before we went ahead with the animation, because we did do the story in like a really short amount of time, and we had only I think a small group of like maybe 8 people who kind of worked on the story itself. We had the whole team kind of, you know, review the story, but overall I feel like you know, when you're making a film, if you have more eyes to look at your story, more eyes to look at, you know, what's just the film as it's being made, they can kind of tell you like what's clear and what's not clear, so you can kind of edit that to really get your message across.
Very cool. Well, and in the short period of time you all had, you delivered incredible stories, especially, and I agree, I think concise stories are just so beautiful because they get the point across without doing too much of the extra stuff. So I think you guys all just delivered it incredibly. I've heard what you wanted out of your film and how you describe your own film. What do you think audience members are going to walk away watching your film and take with them?
I would like to think the audience can take away the hope of humanity. The hope of humanity that regardless of race, creed, color, sexual orientation, disability, because myself being 60% deaf, you know, that sometimes I've had stuff where I've been discriminated against because of my hearing. And so I think regardless of what a child may have to face in their life, that, you know, with that village, that community, starting with your parents and teachers and neighbors and things of that nature, that we're all are joined in this together. We all join in this in one, in this thing that we call life. And, you know, I'm mapping it out to where every child has a chance to succeed and live and be able to achieve their dreams. So I think that's what the audience will be able to take out of it.
For my film, I'm really hoping that people kind of watch it and go, oh, I feel like, you know, I really want to do more research into climate change. I want to do, you know, because I feel like, you know, the first step towards, you know, getting people to act on things is getting people interested in the subject. And that's kind of what I wanted to achieve with my film, to kind of spread awareness, to get people looking into it a little bit more, doing research, finding ways that they can, you know, help fight climate change. And even though we talked about some, or we showed some of the solutions in the film of like, you know, things you could do, like that's not the end of what you can do. There's so many different actions you can take as an individual to fight climate change. And so when we kind of ended this film, we ended it on a more happy note, but we also included, like after the credits, you know, statistics on wildfires in California, so that people can kind of go, oh, okay, like these are the actual numbers, like we need to do something now.
And Jack, what would you say?
I think my initial intention was to create a sense of hope. It sounds cheesy to say, but a sense of hopefulness, and that maybe we would be okay. And then sort of like Meiya just said, I started to worry that I was making a film that was saying like, oh, don't worry guys, we're gonna be fine. And I was like, well, no, not that. So then somewhere along the way, it became more of a you know, a surrogate for how we could view and interpret this tragedy. You know, like I said earlier, I make a lot of films with aliens or sci-fi creatures or just like non-humans, and I do that because I think that it's really easy for someone to identify with like a non-human character. At least I find it easy. Maybe I'm wrong there, but I find it really easy. And I thought that by seeing just such a poor, helpless, and hopefully relatable creature in such peril, it would make the emergency and the fear of the situation feel more real to those that are fortunate enough to not be facing the direct consequences of it. But you know, unfortunately, we are all facing these consequences just a little bit more soon than we should be hoping.
For sure. And we just have 2 more questions. And so feel free, if you have any other comments to say, feel free to put that in there whenever you want. But my favorite question to ask filmmakers who has just completed a piece of work or several months ago, has your family and friends seen it, and what was their responses to it? Did anything like shock you? Did anything surprise you? Was it good to hear the responses? Jack, I feel like you had a good one.
I don't. I really don't. But a lot of my family has seen it. You know, they're very proud of me. But they say they like it. A lot of my friends have seen it as well, and they also say that they like it. You know, I got a lot of really nice feedback from my classmates who know firsthand how painful it was to make. And you know, I'm very fortunate that my family, friends have all been really supportive of me along the way. They've put up with all the temper tantrums that I have when things go wrong. They've been very supportive from, you know, from birth to now. But my favorite feedback, I got it like a lot, which I think if you have seen it yet, if you haven't seen it yet, or when you do watch it, a lot of people told me that Kibu looks like Shrek's baby. And that was first upsetting and then made me really, really proud. And so, you know, if DreamWorks does get wind of this, I am licensing it as a Shrek prequel. But that was probably my favorite. It was probably my favorite piece of feedback that I got.
The feedback that I got, you know, was good, was positive. Like, hey, we really liked the film. The one thing is the child is like, how old is he? I'm like, he's only 5. They're like, really? He's only 5? Like, yeah, he's only 5. So that was probably the biggest thing that I got, was they were just shocked, you know, that how coherent he was with his thoughts and his words and stuff like that at 5. So I don't know if his parents ever thought of him going into acting, perhaps as a profession, but I think the young man has talent. He has talent.
All the feedback I got on my film was, you know, really positive. They're like, yeah, like this is, you know, tackling a really good message. Yeah, all my friends and family have seen the film. They said, yeah, it's great. Like all positive feedback, like Jack was saying, like my family has been supporting me. We're supporting me through that week. Where, you know, I'd stay late in my room on meetings. They'd like, you know, bring food into my room so that I can like, you know, eat and actually survive as a human. I think I didn't really have any like interesting feedback like Paul and Jack had, but like there was a few comments on like the YouTube video that was posted, like, oh, you should send this to Disney, like this could be played before a Pixar film. So I take, you know, that's a really great compliment, thank you. It tells us that, you know, our 2D animation is really, you know, sending a message home and looks good.
It looked beautiful, absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And then just the last question, with keeping in mind the themes of Elfenworks, how do you see the future of filmmaking for yourself or in general? Inspiring hope, how do you think that that's important to see on the big screen? And we can start with Jack, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. I think, short answer, I think it's really, really crucial to the success of not just filmmaking, but all sorts of artistic endeavors. It's really easy for artists and people who want to pursue something in the arts to lose hope. I think it happens far too often. So it, you know, warms my heart that there are, you know, festivals like this one that focus on hope and focus on a brighter future. I would also like to think that, you know, the future we have right now is the result of people dreaming for a brighter future. So I hope that eventually the dreams that we're manifesting result in something positive in the same way.
And Paul, what about you? Give us your insight.
I would like to think that not just on feature films, but I know in any medium, whether it's on plays, on stage, whether it's even through the streaming services, because I know now you have feature films now being released via stream to where people can sit there, you know, look at it on their phones and things of that nature. So, in whatever medium, I think the hope, kind of like what Jack was saying, the hope that's been passed down to us, you know, through our parents, our grandparents, our great grandparents, you know, some of us, we've had family members that immigrated to America. Some of them, I'm part Native American as well, so I have family that was here, indigenous. So it's just that all of this of a better life, a better collective, And this is something, again, kind of, and I hope that we portray this in Hope Speaks, passing that down to the next generation to keep that bottle of innocence, that thing of hope residue in our hearts, because that is what, when he 20, 30 years from now, be able to have that same conversation with his child and to be able to keep that cyclical as part of humanity.
Yeah, I think, that hope is really important, just to, keep people fighting for these issues. And also not just like the hope for like the Elfenworks category, but also, educating people on these issues, because, a lot of people may not know exactly what's going on. And these films, these short films are kind of like the first step that some people are taking to kind of educating themselves more about, social justice, climate justice. And I think, it's just so important that, more people are making films about this, or just different types of media about social justice and climate justice. This Elfenworks category is, really important to kind of keeping people aware and spreading that awareness even more.
I completely agree. And thank you all for creating the stories that start the conversations. And thank you to the Elfenworks Foundation for creating the platform. And thank you everyone for listening to this roundtable discussion. And thank you once again for all the participants that gave their time in answering these questions. We are so excited to see more art from you all and all of these participants. And once again, a big congratulations to the finalists. Thank you all again.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Salutations and salute. Godspeed and good health.